Hello, and welcome to the Curious Wanderer Bible Study. Today we're going to be reviewing and discussing Genesis chapters 16 and 17 under the main topic of waiting. But before we do that, let's recap where we are. Abram has rescued Lot from the battle that had happened between Sodom, Gomorrah, and a couple other kings and five other kings. And now, after that point, God had made a covenant in chapter 15 with Abram, saying that he would be the father of many nations. So, because Abram really wanted to have children. And so now in chapter 16, we continue with what's going on here. And we see, let's just start with chapter 16, verse 1. I'll be reading from the ESV today. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. She had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. So, they've been in Canaan 10 years. It's been somewhere around that amount of time since God has promised Abram children. And they're impatient. I can certainly relate to that. And decide that, well, maybe God's plan wasn't quite what God's plan was originally, what he said. Maybe the way that we're going to do this is with our own method. We're going to circumvent this. We're going to be more realistic about it. At least that's the rationalization they give, Sarai and Abram. And so they go this route. And it works. This plan to have Hagar have a child for Abram works, except it doesn't work. As we see, their impatience gets the better of them. So let's continue reading. So remember, she's looking with contempt upon her mistress because now she is the mother, right? So Hagar is the mother. She thinks that she should be the main person. And so continuing in verse 5, and Sarai said to Abram, May the wrong done to me be on you. I gave my servant to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, she looked on me with contempt. May the Lord judge between you and me. But Abram said to Sarai, Behold, your servant is in your power. Do as you please. Then Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. So Hagar left. Things were going badly. Things fell apart when Sarai and Abram took matters into their own hands and departed from the plan that God had for them when they got impatient. So continuing now, Hagar is on the run. The angel of the Lord found her, so this is verse 7, her being Hagar, by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur, and he said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, Return to your mistress and submit to her. So notice what's happening here. God is trying to rebuild this relationship. They went sideways and things are going badly, and God is trying to help repair the situation. So even whenever we go off on our own, God is there to help us reconcile with each other in addition to reconciling with him. Return to your mistress and submit to her. Continuing in verse 10, the angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are a God of seeing." For she said, "Truly here I have seen him who looks after me." Therefore the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. Okay, so the angel of the Lord is trying to bring Hagar back to Abram and Sarai and try to reconcile this relationship. We end chapter 16 with, "And Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram." All right, so things have gone badly. They've gone sideways, and it's easy for us now, looking back on this, to go, wow, I can't believe they went against what God said, because we know, most of us, that Sarai will indeed have a son. And so we can think, well, why would they have been so impatient? That just, all they have to do is wait. But it had been 10 years of waiting. And then it gets worse on the waiting front, because in chapter 17 we hear, "When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly." So he's now 99. It's been a long time, and Abram is still waiting for this son through Sarai. It's very easy for us to think, well, we know how the story ends, so just be patient. But they don't, as they're living through this. And it's really easy to say, you know what? God's plan isn't this plan. Maybe it's this other plan that's much easier and seems more realistic. Let's just do that. And we hear this cautionary tale when we do this. When Abram takes Hagar as a wife and has a son, his family dynamic is blown apart. Things go really sideways. It takes the Lord intervening to even get Hagar back in the household. They don't elaborate on it much here, but I can't imagine things were smooth in that household for those 13 years. And chapter 17 doesn't see the end of the story yet, where we can find Isaac. But we do see a promise. So while they're waiting, God does come back and say, hey, things are going to change here. So continuing in verse 2, "That I may make my covenant," so we got through that, "and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram," verse 3, "fell on his face, and God said to him, Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham." So God renames Abram to Abraham, because he is going to be this father of many people, and it's a sign of his covenant. Only God can change names at this time in history for these people. So this is a sign that God is changing Abram's fate. And it's a sign for Abram, now Abraham, that God is going to follow through on this plan. And then we get one more thing, that there is this covenant, and there's going to have to be a physical symbol of being set apart here. And we get the covenant of circumcision. So continuing, God says, after continuing in verse 11, "You shall be circumcised in the flesh, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between you and me." So every male is going to be circumcised as a sign that they are a part of this covenant. This is how people will know all around. And this is a sign of a physical change being a mirror of a spiritual change here. So we continue. God further promises that he is going to have a son through Sarai. So verse 15, "And God said to Abraham now, As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name." Interestingly enough, both of those mean princess, so it's just a slight change on that. "I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? So even now, talking to God, he thinks that this is impossible. And Abram said to God, so continuing in verse 18, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear a son, and you shall call him Isaac. I will establish a covenant with him, an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and multiply him greatly. He shall father 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. So God is saying to Abraham here that I understand that you care for Ishmael, and I'm going to take care of Ishmael, but I have a bigger plan for you as well. Don't get lost in the now, is what God is saying to Abraham. Don't get lost in the now. I have this really bright future for you as well, and both things shall come to pass. God really wants Abraham to understand that he has this much larger plan for him. And Abraham literally laughs in God's face. That's impossible. And we find this theme reappearing, as we'll see later, that laughter is a part of this whole process here. And God said, no, but Sarah shall bear. So remember verse 19, God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall call him Isaac. Isaac means laughter. So God notices this and notices this theme playing out, that Abraham still doesn't believe, but that's okay. God is going to make it happen anyway. It's a cautionary tale for us in these 2 chapters that just because we think we have a better plan than God doesn't mean we should follow through on it. There's always this really weird balance between waiting for God's plan to play out and taking an active role in it. And when your active role becomes too much, the sign here that their active role probably became too much is when Sarah and Abraham split off from God's plan and decided to have a family in this other way here. But God used that departure from his plan to help eventually fulfill his plan. So God is still there constantly trying to reconcile us. And so we can take heart in that. We will make mistakes when we're trying to follow God's plan. It just happens. We're human. But even when we make mistakes, God's there to help us to find our way through. Next time we'll be hearing more about how this plan actually comes to fruition. But thank you for your time, and I hope to see you here next time.